Imagine getting slapped with a 30-year sentence for a crime you didn't commit and becoming the punching bag of the nastiest prison in the country. What the bullies didn't realize is that they were actually creating a monster who went into solitary confinement as a weak kid and walked out as a ruthless beast, turning chopsticks into lethal weapons to taking down mafia bosses with his bare hands. Skull up, because Tojo's revenge is about to be absolute chaos. The story takes us to Nerira prison in Sector 4, inside a mess hall full of inmates. We then see our protagonist, Tojo, picking up his tray with what looks like a decent meal. He sits alone at a table and stares at the food with a serious and somewhat empty expression on his face. But suddenly, a pair of chopsticks appears out of nowhere and steals a piece of food from his tray. Tojo looks to the side with a visibly annoyed look at the attitude of the guy who provoked him. Then one of the bullies glares at him and aggressively asks what he's looking at. The other big, tattooed guy just smiles with disdain and challenges the young man to do something. The staring contest continues, and the brute seems to be waiting for a reaction from our character. Without a second thought, the bully simply spits on our protagonist's food with an air of superiority. But Tojo stands up and tells the guy to eat it all, warning that there will be consequences if he doesn't. The two criminals aren't intimidated and ask what his problem is and if he has no manners. And then the brute calls him a killer, which clearly hits a nerve with the protagonist. Tojo then stomps hard on the table and promises to get revenge on everyone who framed him unjustly. He lunges at the bully, wanting to make him feel the same suffering he felt. Our hero's face shows an uncontrollable fury as he goes on the attack. With that, the big guy is completely shocked by the boy's unexpected and violent reaction. In a swift move, he uses the chopsticks as a weapon and goes straight for his opponent's face. At that, a lot of red liquid splatters everywhere, staining the mess hall floor. The bully falls to the ground with the object stuck in his eye, feeling immense pain from the blow. The scene then cuts to 2 weeks earlier, showing a table full of fancy food and drinks. We see Tojo in a fancy room looking at someone who is currently out of view. He thinks about the girl he likes, Mio Karasawa, and decides he's going to confess to her today. Mio then announces she's going to the restroom and hands the microphone to a friend as our hero watches. She walks away and goes through a door, giving one last look back in the young man's direction. With that, the protagonist stands up, determined to finally reveal his feelings for her. Then the young man heads towards the restrooms to find the girl and talk to her. He finds her in the hallway and gets a little nervous as he approaches to say what he feels. The young man calls her name and says he has something to tell her, and Mio asks why he looks so serious. Embarrassed, he declares his feelings, asking if she wants to go out with him, because he's liked her for a long time. The girl is surprised by the unexpected confession and seems a bit awkward about how to respond. She then says she's happy but isn't looking for a boyfriend right now and apologizes to him. After the rejection, Mio simply turns her back and walks away, leaving the protagonist behind. Tojo is in complete shock from the rejection and can't believe what just happened. Back at the table, he takes out his frustration by crushing a drink can with all his might. The table is now filled with empty cans and bottles, showing that he drank a lot to drown his sorrows. He chugs can after can, trying to forget the painful rejection he just suffered. Even though he already looks drunk, the young man grabs another drink to keep going. Eventually, he passes out at the table while his friends continue the party, singing karaoke. Our hero is completely out of it and mumbles something while drooling a bit on the table. When he wakes up, he realizes he's alone in the dark room and wonders where everyone went. Still a bit drunk, he opens the room's door and looks down the hallway with a confused expression. There, he comes across a cordoned-off crime scene and wonders what could have happened. At that moment, a police officer grabs him from behind abruptly, taking the young man completely by surprise. The officer then confirms his identity, accusing him of extremely serious and shocking crimes. The young man is completely confused and asks who he took out, while the officer reports the capture of the suspect. Tojo freezes upon hearing Mio Karasawa's name and tries to process the terrible information. In complete desperation, he yells that it's impossible and tries to push past the scene's caution tape. The young man clings to the caution tape, still unable to believe what is happening. His face shows pure dread and confusion as he begins to understand the gravity of the situation. He then sees Mio on the ground, unresponsive in a terrible scene, and thinks it must all be a lie. The scene shifts to a courtroom where a judge sentences him to 30 years in prison for the crimes. The victim's relatives are furious with the decision and wonder why he didn't receive the highest sentence. In shock, our hero can't react and wonders how his life got to this point. He has a glimpse of Mio smiling and questions if this is all just a horrible nightmare. With tears in his eyes, the protagonist desperately insists that he didn't commit the crime. Then the young man's father stands up and defends him, saying his son is innocent and is being wronged. But the girl's mother accuses him of still making excuses and says he is unforgivable for what he did. 3 men then stand up and furiously go after Tojo's father in the middle of the courtroom. They violently assault the man and knock him to the ground while the protagonist screams for his father. Tojo screams desperately, begging them to stop the assault, unable to do anything. Even while being beaten, the young man's father yells for him not to worry, that he will prove his innocence. Back in the present, the scene takes us to our protagonist's cell in the prison. Inside, he is surrounded by a group of inmates led by an intimidating guy. He and other newcomers are lined up while the veterans look them over with contempt. Holding his things, one of the guys asks Tojo what crime brought him there. The young man is intimidated by the threatening glare of the big, tattooed guy and can barely answer. Then another inmate hits him from behind and yells at him not to ignore their boss. With tears in his eyes, the young man insists he did nothing and that it was all a setup. But the leader doesn't seem to believe him and with a cold look, tells the newcomer to come closer. The protagonist obeys and stands before the brute, not knowing what to expect. Without warning, the big guy lands a powerful kick right in our hero's stomach. The force of the blow sends him flying backward and he hits the cell floor hard. The guy lifts him up and asks if he's the one responsible for the crime, and the young man denies it again. Annoyed that he's still denying it, the boss orders another guy to hit him with another kick. One of the aggressors says he can't stand people like him and challenges him to react somehow. The leader then gets tired of the situation and tells his henchmen to tie our character up. They grab him tightly while the young man yells and tries to break free without success. His hands are tied firmly with a rope, leaving him completely defenseless. One of the henchmen approaches with a sadistic smile and asks if he still thinks he can resist. And then he delivers a violent punch to the protagonist's gut, who suffers from the impact. The brutal beating continues, and the young man endures the blows, gritting his teeth in pain. The inmates use him as a punching bag and assault him nonstop while he's tied up. After the beating, he is left hanging there, all bruised and covered in his own red liquid. The cell boss then grabs his hair and glares at him while he can barely stay conscious. He threatens him, telling him not to say anything to the guards or things will get much worse. The brute reinforces the warning, but our hero glares back at him with deep hatred in his eyes. Sometime later, a guard calls the protagonist for a private talk in the hallway. The officer then reveals devastating news that the young man's parents were in an accident. He also asks about other relatives, as life in there will be tough without financial help from the outside. The guard insists on the question, but the young man is in complete shock and can't say a word. With tears streaming down his face, he finally answers that he has no other living relatives. The officer then sighs and says he no longer cares about his fate, dismissing him coldly. The guards leave to get something to eat, leaving our character alone and completely helpless. With that, the scene takes us back to the mess hall, showing the same tray of food from the beginning. And we see Tojo again sitting at the table, but now with a look completely transformed by pain. Again, one of the bullies approaches and steals a piece of his meal with the chopsticks. This time, the protagonist glares back at him with silent fury and a dark determination. The henchman gets angry and asks what he's looking at, while the boss just watches the scene. The other criminal smiles with disdain and challenges him to do something, thinking he won't react. But the boss notices the change in the newcomer's eyes and becomes alert to the tension in the air. The bully repeats the provocation and spits on our protagonist's food to humiliate him. But this time, Tojo stands up with a cold look and tells the guy to eat everything he spat out. The criminals laugh at him and ask what's wrong with his face and if he has no manners. Then the brute calls him a killer, which unleashes all the pent-up anger inside the young man. With that, he remembers Mia's rejection and how his life fell apart from that day on. The image of his father being beaten while promising to prove his innocence also comes to his mind. He recalls the humiliation of being tied up and beaten by those same inmates in the cell. And he wonders why he had to suffer so much with all these injustices in his life. The young man then concludes that he has already lost everything and has no reason to hold back anymore. Thinking that no one would care if he were gone, his hand trembles with rage, tightening its grip on the chopsticks. The word killer echoes in his mind and a dark, terrifying smile forms on his face. But he decides he can't be gone just yet, as he has a new purpose to keep on living. So he stomps hard on the table and vows to get revenge on every single person who framed him. He lunges at the bully, promising to make him feel the same suffering. His face twists into an expression of pure fury and an uncontrollable thirst for vengeance. The big guy is completely shocked and speechless at the newcomer's explosive attitude. In the blink of an eye, he leaps and attacks the brute, using the chopsticks as a sharp weapon. The attack is precise, and a lot of red liquid splatters everywhere from the impact of the blow. The bully falls to the ground with the object stuck in his eye, screaming in pain from the serious injury. He writhes on the floor, hand on his face, letting out an agonizing scream of pure pain. The henchman panics and screams for his boss, who is on the ground agonizing in pain. Without hesitating, Tojo punches the wall with force and screams at all of them to just get lost. With that, one of the bullies gets enraged and goes after our hero from behind. But the protagonist turns with a sadistic smile, looking ready for more. Another inmate is terrified by the violent scene and starts to break out in a cold sweat from fear. The young man then drops the chopsticks on the floor and gets ready to fight with his bare hands. He lands a devastating punch on one of the henchmen who had attacked him in the cell earlier. With a crazed look, the young man thinks that since he's going to be gone anyway, he's going to take all those wretches with him and continues the assault without mercy. The opponent's face becomes completely disfigured by the force of our hero's blows. The criminal falls backward, already unconscious after receiving the series of punches. Tojo transforms into a shadow of fury and continues to attack the other inmates. Another bully is on the ground with his face all bruised and covered in red liquid. Then one of the henchmen tries to pull the protagonist off the boss, who is still down. He yells for the young man to let go of his boss and tries to land a punch to push him away. The henchman is shocked to see that his attacks have no effect on our hero. With a glazed-over look, Tojo seems to have completely lost his sanity in the middle of the fight. Just then, the prison guards finally arrive and shout, asking what's going on. One of the officers grabs the protagonist by the shoulder to try to contain the widespread chaos. And without a second thought, the guard punches Tojo in the face for causing trouble. But the punch has no effect, and Tojo just turns his head with a look full of hatred. The guard panics and orders the injured man to be taken to infirmary, threatening the other inmates. At that, our protagonist lets out a deafening scream of pure rage and frustration. He then dodges another blow from the guard with surprising agility. The officer is completely confused by the young man's reaction and speed. He then yells that the young man is trying to run into the wall and tells the others to hold him. With that, several guards and inmates join in to try to restrain our hero. They finally manage to hold him, but the young man continues to struggle with all his might. Tojo keeps screaming desperately while being held back by the others. The scene then takes us to an infirmary where we see an IV being administered. Our protagonist is in bed and seems to have lost the will to live, not having eaten for days. A doctor tells the guard that if he continues like this, his life will be in danger. When the doctor leaves, an old janitor appears at the door of the young man's room. The elderly man starts sweeping the hallway floor near where the young man is. Then the janitor tells the protagonist that he shouldn't throw his life away. Tojo looks at the old man with an empty gaze, showing no apparent reaction. The man asks who will clear his parents' names if he departs like that. The old man's words have an immediate impact, and the young man's eyes widen in shock. He sits up in bed and asks what the janitor just said to him. The man then asks if he has ever considered if what happened to his parents was really an accident. Tojo gets out of bed and asks what the old man is trying to say. The janitor reveals with a smile that it was no accident, and that his parents were eliminated. Furious, the young man grabs the man by the collar and demands to know how he has this information. The old man says there's always something behind it, and asks directly if the boy committed the crime. Our protagonist denies it on the spot, saying firmly that he did absolutely nothing. The man then concludes that it was a setup, and that his parents found proof of his innocence. The young man realizes that makes sense, and says he always found everything very strange from the start. He remembers the scene and wonders who the culprit could be, and the motive for it all. With tears of rage streaming down, he grits his teeth thinking about all the injustice. With a new purpose, he yells that he can't be gone until he can avenge his parents. The janitor gives a satisfied smile upon seeing our hero's new determination. But he warns that in his current state, Tojo won't do anything and that Gariki wants to finish him. The young man replies that it's okay and that there is a way for him to survive. Impressed by his courage, the old man says he liked his attitude and his grit. He then proposes that if Tojo survives Gariki, he might help him with a little something. With a mischievous look, the man reveals that his intention is to escape from that prison. After the shocking proposal, the old inmate turns to leave the room. Before leaving, he points to a book and tells the young man to read it when he has free time. Tojo then picks up the book from the table as the janitor walks away down the hall. He looks at the cover and sees that the book is about human anatomy and its weak points. The protagonist then asks who he is, and the old man replies that his name is Sachiya. He tells the young man to just call him Old Timer, and then turns and leaves the room. Just then, a guard suddenly enters the infirmary room with a furious expression on his face. The officer yells at our hero, asking what he's doing reading a book so calmly. He complains that life there has become a nightmare because of the trouble the boy caused earlier. The guard then tells him to get up and says he's going to solitary for a month to cool off. He throws him hard into the cell and says that if he wants to be gone so badly, he can do it in there alone. Tojo is left in the complete darkness of solitary confinement with only the light from a small window. Holding the book, he thinks that he no longer has any desire to give in to the darkness. With a determined and hate-filled look, he vows to himself that he will have his revenge. The scene moves forward 15 days, and we see a hand putting a key in the cell door's lock. The same guard opens the door and shouts that it's time, telling him to come out if he's still alive. But upon looking inside, the officer is completely shocked and speechless at what he sees. From the darkness of the cell emerges the silhouette of Tojo, now with an incredibly muscular physique. His body is totally defined and ripped, showing the result of his intense training. The guard stammers, asking what he's been doing in there, and the young man says it was nothing much. With a sinister smile, he claims he was just reflecting on his sins. Next, the scene takes us to the prison yard where several inmates are working. Our protagonist walks with firm, confident steps across the yard with a new posture. One of Gariki's henchmen spots him from a distance and seems surprised to see him around again. The henchman shouts to the other inmates, announcing with a malicious smile that Tojo has appeared in the yard. With that, several criminals armed with iron bars surround our hero, ready to attack. But the protagonist doesn't seem the least bit intimidated and cracks a sinister and confident smile. Then the gang leader, Gariki, appears and says he got out of the hospital early just for him. He points to the scar on his face and swears he'll make the young man pay 100 times over. The brute then gives the order for his henchmen to get our protagonist with everything they've got. The inmates charge as a group towards the young man, trying to take him down with their numerical advantage. Our hero braces for combat with a serious and focused expression on his face. With incredible speed, he dodges the blows and hits the criminals with precise elbow strikes. Goriki is shocked by the scene and yells at his henchmen, threatening them if they don't defeat him. Tojo grits his teeth with anger and continues to fight with impressive ferocity. He lets out a powerful war cry as he prepares to face the rest of the gang. The young man stumps hard on the ground and charges at the other bullies surrounding him. Like a blur, he moves between the enemies and takes down several of them with swift and brutal blows. Furious with what he sees, the gang leader decides to join the fight and goes after our hero. But the protagonist intercepts Goriki's punch and uses it to grab several iron rebars. With a look full of hatred, he yells for the brute to go away once and for all. He then lifts the big guy up and throws him with all his might onto the iron rebars. Goriki lets out a scream of excruciating pain as he's hit by the iron rebars on the ground. From the roof, the other gang members watch the scene in shock and shout for their boss. From the top of the building, our hero throws Goriki with all his force down into the prison yard. He then jumps from the roof and lands on top of the brute to finish the job once and for all. Lying on the ground, he thinks about those who tormented him and those who framed him. With a look full of hatred, he vows to himself that he will crush them all. But before he can do anything, guards and other inmates rush to intervene in the fight. One of the officers shouts for Tojo to stop what he's doing before it's too late. He warns him that if he takes the brute's life, he will certainly receive the highest sentence. Upon hearing this, the young man stops and realizes he can't be gone without getting his revenge first. He grits his teeth in frustration and holds back from delivering the final blow to his enemy. With a cry of rage, the protagonist stands up while the other inmates watch him with fear. After this incident, his sentence is increased by another 20 years, and his reputation in the prison changes. In the infirmary, he recovers from his injuries and continues his studies with the anatomy book. The guard informs him that Goriki has been transferred and will be in a wheelchair forever. The officer asks if his wounds have healed, and the young man says he's going back to his cell. Tojo realizes that now no one wants to get involved with a crazy guy who isn't afraid of his own end. He then gets out of bed and walks down the hallway with a new aura of danger. In the hallway, he meets the old janitor again, who looks at him with a smile. Our protagonist says he survived and calls in the old-timer's promise to help him escape. The man laughs and says he will help, but he needs the young man to create an opportunity for them. Our hero then asks what he needs to do for the escape plan to work. The old inmate cracks a mischievous smile, revealing a plan for our hero. He then whispers in Tojo's ear and says he needs to cause a major disturbance in the prison. The protagonist asks what comes next and questions if he can really trust the old-timer. Tsuchiya explains that the sewer grate in the kitchen has been loose for a long time. He says that if the young man causes a commotion, they can use the chance to escape through the sewer. The man also tells the boy to go check for himself if he doesn't believe his words. But our hero says he doesn't need to, and that he'll do anything to get out of that place. Determined, he assures the old-timer that he can leave everything to him. Sometime later, the young man is taken by a guard back to his old cell. Upon arriving there, Goriki's former henchmen are completely surprised and scared. The guard locks the cell, and our hero faces the other inmates with an intimidating look. With a sinister smile, he challenges anyone who wants to avenge Goriki to take a step forward. But the bullies panic and say it was all a misunderstanding and that they hated their old boss. They then start to suck up to the young man, saying that he is their new boss now. Everyone agrees and starts chanting the protagonist's name as the new leader of the cell. With that, Tojo takes full control of the cell with a look of pure domination. The scene then shifts to the mess hall where we see our hero eating his meal. One of the inmates takes a piece of meat from his own tray and offers it to the new boss. Smiling, the henchman places the food on Tojo's tray as a sign of respect. Then other criminals join in and start offering their best portions of food. But the young man feels awkward and says he can't eat that much food at once. At another table, some inmates comment that Goriki got beaten by that newcomer and will be bedridden forever. A bearded brute complains that the new leader hasn't come to pay his respects to him yet. One of his henchmen tries to calm him down and says he'll talk to the young man to bring him to their side. The lackey also claims that with the newcomer's help, the entire block will belong to his boss, Yumi-san. Just then, we see a hand slamming hard on the wooden table to get someone's attention. One of the big boss's henchmen approaches Tojo and asks if he's the guy they're looking for. The man introduces himself and questions why he hasn't gone to greet the boss, Yumi-san, yet. Our protagonist stares at him coldly and asks if he has a problem with that. One of the young man's new followers whispers fearfully, warning him that Yumi-san is a dangerous guy. Tojo then looks to the other side of the mess hall and sees the so-called big boss staring at him from afar. From a distance, one of Yumi-san's men tells the other to teach the newcomer a lesson in manners. With that, the henchman slams the table and yells that there are rules in that place that must be followed. But our hero wastes no time and lands a solid punch right in the face of the bully who provoked him. A lot of red liquid splatters everywhere as the protagonist stares at him coldly. The boss Yumi-san and his other henchmen are completely shocked by the young man's attitude. Tojo's new followers are also left with their jaws dropped by the unexpected scene of violence. The man flies back from the impact of the punch and desperately yells for his boss's help. Furious at the scene, the brute stands up and slams the table, calling our hero a wretch. The scene shows the henchman on the ground while Tojo faces the big boss with a challenging look. Yumi-san's followers are shocked by the scene and ask if this is for real. With that, the bearded big boss's face contorts with an expression of pure fury and hatred. The brute's other henchman falls silent, and one of them even covers his mouth in astonishment. Lying on the ground, the man who was hit yells furiously that he's going to finish our protagonist. But Tojo simply turns and faces the enormous Yumi-san without showing a hint of fear. The brute then says that in his entire life, he's never seen someone as arrogant as the newcomer. The young man replies that now he's seen one right in front of him. Just then, a guard appears shouting and tells everyone to get back to their meals immediately. The big boss grumbles angrily and warns that our hero will greatly regret having challenged him. He turns to leave and sets up a score to settle for the next day's break time. The assaulted henchman is left on the floor and cries desperately, calling for his boss who abandoned him. Then one of Tojo's new allies warns him that tomorrow they will come at them with everything they have, but the protagonist calls them cowards and says they just need to deal with everyone at once. The other inmates are scared and don't know how to react to their new leader's confidence. One of our hero's followers then kneels on the ground with new determination. He apologizes to the boss for being scared and bows as a sign of loyalty. He then stands up and shouts that the next day, they will fight with all their strength. All the other inmates get fired up and raise their fists while Tojo remains calm and serious. During the night, our protagonist gets up and takes the blanket from a sleeping cellmate. With his hands, he begins to twist the fabric tightly, turning it into a kind of rope. That night, our protagonist finishes twisting a blanket, turning it into a makeshift weapon. The next day during break time, we see the prison yard with inmates doing their activities. Two guards watch everything closely to ensure no trouble breaks out. Just then, one of the inmates approaches and offers some good quality cigarettes to one of the officers. The two guards accomplice in accepting the offer and walk away to have a smoke. Yumi-san and his henchmen notice the movement and see the guards being conveniently distracted. Meanwhile, our hero's gang is sitting on a roof, waiting for the right moment to act. One of his followers then informs the boss that the enemies have finally arrived at the meeting spot. With that, our protagonist cracks a confident smile and seems more than ready for the fight. He then turns to his men and asks them all to show their determination in the battle. The two gangs run towards each other, and the huge brawl finally begins in the yard. One of our hero's allies lands a powerful punch to the face of one of Yumi-san's henchmen. The man takes a bad beating, and his face is covered in red liquid from the force of the blows he receives. Another of the young man's followers also joins the fight and lands a devastating blow on another enemy. One of the rivals looks back and sees that the guards are still far away and won't help. Finally, one of the guards notices the fight and complains angrily that another brawl has started again. The fight continues with the protagonist's gang completely dominating Yumi-san's henchmen. The guards start running and blowing their whistles, desperately trying to control the situation that has gotten out of hand. Just then, our hero lands a flying kick with all his might right on the back of the big boss Yumi-san. The brute grits his teeth in pain and surprise from the young man's sudden and powerful attack. Amidst the chaos, one of the guards tries to use his baton, but is stopped by an inmate. The officer yells that this is a violation of the rules and orders a security team to be called quickly. The yard floor becomes covered in red liquid as the widespread chaos continues. Just then, one of Tojo's followers looks around with a visibly worried expression. He then realizes the boss has vanished in the middle of the fight and wonders where he went. Meanwhile, our protagonist takes advantage of the distraction and quietly escapes into a building. Inside, the old-timer congratulates him on a job well done and says they can finally escape now. With a smile on his face, the elderly man tells our hero to follow him without wasting any more time. The two then walk hastily down a hallway towards the planned escape route. They reach the kitchen, and the old-timer stops right in front of the sewer grate he mentioned. Without much difficulty, the elderly man lifts the heavy metal grate, revealing the passage. He then turns to the young man with a satisfied smile that his plan is working out. Our protagonist stares at the passage with a serious and determined expression on his face. The old-timer uses a tool to finish loosening the grate while Tojo waits for the signal. The entrance to the dark and dirty sewer opens up, revealing the path to their long-awaited freedom. One of them steps into the filthy water of the tunnel and begins the journey through the darkness of the sewer. The old-timer warns that the smell is horrible, but that he needs to hang in there for a while. Our protagonist covers his nose to try to endure the unbearable stench of that place. They continue moving through the dark tunnel as several rats scurry past them. The sewer is completely infested with rats everywhere, creating a disgusting scene. The old-timer then announces that they have finally reached their destination at the end of the tunnel. They arrive at a large metal grate that appears to be the final exit from the sewer. Our protagonist then asks what they are going to do now to get out of there. But the elderly man tells him to relax because he has already made all the necessary arrangements. He reveals that he's been there a few times before and managed to loosen one of the iron bars. With that, the old-timer tells the young man to push the bar hard to open the passage. Tojo approaches the grate and with a bit of effort, manages to dislodge the metal bar. The passage is open, and they can finally get out of the sewer to freedom. But upon getting out, our hero is surprised by an unexpected attack from his companion. The old-timer shoves a sharp object into the young man's chest with a malicious smile on his face. He says that the protagonist's mission ends there, and that he will grant his wish to be gone. From the blow, Tojo stumbles backward and falls to the ground, feeling immense pain. The man then turns and starts to walk away, leaving the young man behind. But our hero manages to grab the old-timer's leg before he can escape. The traitor is shocked to see that the young man is still alive and looks at him in surprise. Tojo then says he found it strange that a complete stranger would help him like that. He reveals that as a precaution, he had several things on his body to protect himself. With that, he shows that the object only pierced the book he had hidden in his clothes. The old-timer praises the young man's cleverness while Tojo says he won't trust anyone anymore. But the elderly man reminds him that he was the one who taught him to fight and challenges him to face him. Without wasting time, Tojo lunges at the traitor and attacks him with a powerful punch. The old-timer holds the blade firmly and seems ready for a serious fight. He then says there is only one chance to win and blames the young man's navy if he loses. But our protagonist is not fazed by the taunt and faces the challenge with determination. With a swift move, he throws the twisted, wet blanket on top of the enemy, and taking advantage of the distraction, he lands a devastating punch right in the elderly man's face. The old-timer falls to the ground screaming in pain and desperately covers his face with his hands. He then realizes it's lime and asks when the young man managed to prepare all that. Tojo reveals that he knew about the blade and the acid thanks to a guy who snitched on the plan. Even blinded, the traitor gets up furiously and swears he will take the protagonist down with him. But our hero shows a vial of poison and asks if he's looking for that. In a flashback, we see that the young man switched the vial of acid for one of water without the old-timer seeing. The old man's face twists into a mix of shock and pure rage at the revelation. Furious, the old-timer attacks with the blade, but the young man easily dodges the blows. Our protagonist then counterattacks with another precise punch right on the enemy's chin. And to finish it off, he lands a powerful kick that sends the traitor flying far away. Down and defeated, the old man admits that he was truly naive to underestimate the young man. Tojo then picks up the blade and says he won't make the same mistake again with him. The old-timer laments that it's a shame to be defeated by someone like our protagonist. Without hesitation, our hero delivers the final blow to the traitor, ending it all at once. To make sure, our hero takes the vial of acid and pours it over the old-timer's body. He then thanks the traitor for making him a step stronger with everything that happened. Finally free, he walks down a dirt road with the city skyline in the background. The young man closes his eyes and takes a deep breath, feeling the scent of freedom for the first time. He then ties pieces of meat to his back with some makeshift straps. Then he throws the improvised package of the water to serve as bait and a distraction. Free and with a new purpose, he tells himself that now it's time for his revenge. The scene then shifts to a diner where some prison guards are eating. The owner of the place comments that they are looking for the escapee who hasn't been caught yet. One of the guards confirms and says he thought there were 2 escapees, not just one. The owner then explains that the young man was found without life, while the old man disappeared. With a smile, one of the officers says that the old-timer is not an ordinary person to deal with. He then rips the identification tag off a prisoner's uniform he has. In the guard's imagination, he sees the scene of Tojo pouring acid on the old-timer's body. The diner owner comments that the young man's departure was quite tragic either way. But the officer says he deserved it because he was imprisoned for terrible and unforgivable crimes. Another guard then reveals that the young man's parents stole the autopsy report to prove his innocence. The officer is shocked by the revelation and starts connecting the dots of the whole story. He realizes that the parents were eliminated so that the truth would never come out. Meanwhile, in the same diner, a man in a cap stands up, seemingly having heard everything. One of the guards calls out to the man in the cap, and the young man slowly turns to face him. The officer doesn't recognize him and just stares at him with a serious and slightly suspicious expression. He then warns him not to wander around too much because a dangerous fugitive on the loose in the city. With a calm expression, our protagonist says he understands the prison guard's warning. Elsewhere, we see a well-dressed man walking and whistling calmly down the street. Our disguised hero observes him from a distance and starts following him without being noticed. The man continues his walk and wonders what he's going to eat when he gets home later. But suddenly, he is surprised from behind, and a blade is pressed against his neck. The young man panics and says he has no money as he's just a part-time employee. Our protagonist tells him to shut up and answer his questions honestly. He then asks who instructed him to set up Gakyu Tojo, and the man is shocked. The young man asks what he meant by you too, and the man becomes visibly nervous. He yells for our hero not to get involved and threatens him, telling him to leave immediately. Tojo has a flashback of his friend Yuji and wonders if he was also hurt because of him. Without a second thought, he shoves the blade into the man's leg with all his might. As the young man screams in pain, our protagonist takes off his cap and asks who did that to Yuji. The man is terrified upon finally recognizing his attacker and asks if he is Tojo. Our hero ignores the question and demands to know who made him give false testimony in court. But the young man refuses to talk and says the mastermind is not someone he can defeat. Angered by the man's stubbornness, our protagonist assaults him with a series of punches. With the blade to his neck, Tojo pressures him and gives him one last chance to cooperate. Scared, the young man says he doesn't know who the mastermind is, but reveals that Rei Amano paid him. Our protagonist is surprised by the name and wonders who this Rei Amano could be. He remembers her and realizes that since she's Mayo's best friend, she must know the whole truth. Furious and full of hatred, he demands to know where this girl can be found. The man begs for his life and reveals that she works as a hostess at the Grandia nightclub. The young man says he has told him everything and pleads to be spared as he was threatened to do it. He continues to beg for his life and promises to cooperate if our hero lets him go. But our protagonist doesn't listen and gags the man so he can't scream. With a cold look, he tells the young man not to worry because he's not going to finish him now. Then our hero simply kicks him hard into a nearby well. From above, he warns that if anything happens to him, the man will stay there to starve. After the warning, he turns and walks away, leaving the young man trapped in the darkness of the well. At the bottom of the well, the man is completely terrified of his cruel and uncertain fate. Our protagonist then leaves the place and continues his journey in search of his revenge. He then hides and observes from afar a man covered in bandages sitting near a campfire. The man laments that someone has passed and says he didn't even get to take revenge on who did it. With a determined look, our hero recognizes the man as his old friend Yuji. In a flashback, we see that Yuji was a tough guy who always stood up for the weaker ones. He then comforts the young Tojo and promises that no one will ever mess with him again. Yuji then punches the ground in anger and swears he will find the truth to prove his friend's innocence. After yelling, he ends up passing out from exhaustion right there near the lit campfire. Our hero thinks that he can't involve his friend anymore and vows to settle this debt alone. With that, he goes to the Grandia nightclub to finally find this Rei Amano. There, he sees a brute leaving with a girl who seems to be Amano. The young woman says goodbye to the man and thanks him for the night, promising a next time. Then she looks at her watch and tells herself that it's time for her to go. So our protagonist starts following her carefully through the dark city streets. He then pulls out a blade and prepares to approach her to get the answers he needs. But her bag makes a noise, and he is surprised, thinking he's been discovered. The girl answers her phone and says she's already left work and is heading to the usual spot. Our hero continues to follow her closely to find out where this meeting place is. She then enters a place called Net Paradise, and the young man watches everything from afar. He thinks the place belongs to a criminal named Haruto Kagami, and that she is meeting with him. The protagonist crushes a can and realizes that this Kagami will arrive soon and that this is his only chance. He then enters the place, and the girl mistakes him for someone else and complains about the delay. But when she turns around, she gets scared and asks who he is and how he got in. Calmly, our hero holds up a soda can and says he just came to deliver a drink. The girl reaches out her hand to take the can without suspecting a thing. But in a swift move, he seizes the chance and grabs her wrist with all his strength. With that, he immobilizes her and presses the blade to her neck, warning her not to make a sound. With a cold look, the protagonist then asks if she can recognize him. She is completely shocked and stammers Tojo's name, wondering how he's alive. He then questions why she framed him, but the girl denies it and asks if he really thinks it was her. She explains that the setup cost a lot of money and that if she had that kind of cash, she wouldn't be there. Our hero then seriously asks who the real mastermind behind it all was. Amano warns him that it's better he doesn't know, because the guy is untouchable and tells him to run away. But the protagonist presses the blade harder, making a small cut on her neck. With a crazed look, he gives her one last chance to talk before something worse happens. Scared, she finally reveals that the mastermind was Koki Yoshida, leaving our hero surprised. The image of a white-haired man comes to his mind, and he wonders why it would be him. The girl then points inside the place and reveals that the person he's looking for is waiting. Amano says she's told him everything she knows and begs him to stop digging deeper and just leave. But the young man says his parents are gone, and now he has a reason to keep living. He then lets her go and calmly says they can have a drink sometime. The girl turns and seems to agree with the proposal while writing something on a piece of paper. But our hero says that only revenge is left for him and tells her to choose if she's with him or against him. She then hands him the paper and promises to explain everything later, asking him to leave quickly. Tojo takes the paper and sees that what looks like a phone number is written on it. He agrees to call the next day but warns that he will have no mercy if she tries to trick him. Just then, the so-called Koki Yoshida appears in the hallway with his henchmen and walks towards our hero. The group approaches, and the protagonist faces the man in the pink suit with a serious and focused look. A drop of sweat runs down his face as he prepares for the inevitable encounter. The two then stand face to face in the middle of the hallway in a moment of pure tension. Yoshida stares at him for a moment and thinks he's seen that face somewhere before. He then asks what happened to the young man's neck, and he makes up some excuse. Later, lying in his bed, our protagonist recalls the events of that fateful night. In a flashback, he remembers seeing Yoshida talking and drinking with Mayo at the karaoke bar. He also recalls seeing Amano and Mayo singing together while he watched everything from afar. The scene of himself passed out drunk at the table also comes to his mind clearly. Then he remembers seeing Yoshida and Mayo leaving hand in hand while he was drunk. With tears in his eyes, he wonders why that wretch took everything from him like that. With his fist clenched in hatred, the young man screams Yoshida's name with all the strength in his lungs. The next day, we see our hero using a payphone to make an important call. He then arranges a meeting with Amano at the park near the river for that same evening. On the other end of the line, the girl agrees to the meeting and seems to understand the situation. Elsewhere, we see Amano singing with a man on a couch to keep up appearances. That night, the girl arrives at the meeting spot and waits for our protagonist alone. Our hero then appears behind her with a serious and determined expression on his face. Without beating around the bush, he gets straight to the point and asks exactly how his parents passed. The girl then reveals that his parents got the original autopsy report and were planning a new trial. But Yoshida got scared of the truth leaking and staged an accident to eliminate both of them at once. The image of his lifeless parents comes to the protagonist's mind, filling him with pain and hatred. With tears in her eyes, the young woman turns to the young man and apologizes for everything that happened to him. Furious, he shoves her and yells that apologizing now means absolutely nothing to him. She says she doesn't expect forgiveness, but wants to tell the whole truth as a form of repentance. He then grabs her and asks what was in the report and how Mio really passed away. Amano reveals that the report showed fluids from 3 different men, but none of them were his. Our protagonist is completely shocked by the revelation and can't believe what he just heard. She continues and says that Yoshida and his friends offered money, and Mio went willingly. In a flashback, we see the villain offering a card to the girl while other men watch. Mayo then asks with a mischievous look what kind of fun they had in mind for the night. Amano says they forced her to use substances, and with a high dose, she couldn't take it and passed. The scene shows Mio at a party while a guy offers her more substances to use. Then, a man forces her to consume a white powder against her will in the middle of the party. One of the guys then takes her to a room and bothers her while she is completely defenseless. Suddenly, they realize she isn't moving and panic at the unexpected situation. Tojo is devastated and can't believe the girl he loved was that kind of person. Angrily, he holds her tightly and asks why they decided to frame him of all people. She explains they needed a culprit and used the story of the confession to create the sham. With a dark look, our protagonist asks if everything she told him is really true. Amano reveals that Yoshida also threatened her life, which is why she also hates him very much. With his fists clenched in hatred, the young man vows to himself that he will crush the villain no matter what. But the young woman warns him that after the incident, Yoshida's father hired 8 bodyguards for him. She explains that they are all professionals and that he will never get close, so he should run away. The girl still tries to convince him, saying she's sure his parents would want him to live. Our hero says he will let her live for telling the truth but warns her not to interfere. He then asks her to come with him, and the two walk together across the park's footbridge. The young man explains that as a precaution, he can't let her go until everything is finally resolved. He then asks her to hand over her cell phone, and the young woman obeys without questioning his order. But suddenly, the protagonist attacks her from behind with a precise blow to her neck. He then throws her into the well, and she says she deserves it but begs him not to pass away like that. With a cold look, the young man warns that if he is gone, she can starve in there with the other guy. At the bottom of the well, Amano looks at the other prisoner and thinks that this is her deserved punishment. The scene then takes us to a nightclub where we see Yoshida having fun with a girl in his arms. Hidden in the crowd, our hero observes the villain from afar with a look of pure vengeance. He sees Yoshida on stage surrounded by security guards and realizes it will be difficult to get close to him. Just then, the villain's companion approaches and invites him to go to the restroom together. Yoshida smiles at the proposal and comments that she is very bold for suggesting that in front of everyone. He tells his security to wait and walks away with the young woman as our hero watches everything. Our protagonist realizes this is his only chance and that it's worth risking everything now. But when he tries to follow, one of the security guards stops him and tells him to halt immediately. The young man then stares at him coldly and asks if he can't even go to the restroom in peace. The guard continues to stare at him with a suspicious look, trying to assess the situation. After a moment of tension, the security guard finally gives in and tells him to go ahead. Already in the restroom, our hero hears some suspicious noises coming from inside one of the stalls. He approaches the door and knocks to get the attention of whoever is in there. From inside, the villain yells at him not to disturb them, and our hero prepares to attack. With a powerful kick, he breaks the door from the bottom and hits Yoshida squarely with the impact. The girl who was with the villain is on the floor, completely frightened by the sudden intrusion. Furious, Yoshida gets up and yells, asking who the heck he is and if he wants to be gone. Without wasting time, our protagonist lunges with a blade in hand towards his enemy. The villain's companion screams in terror as Tojo manages to cut his neck. Yoshida holds his neck in pain and shouts, asking what the young man is doing there. Our hero then lands a devastating punch right in his opponent's face with all his might. He then grabs the villain and presses the blade firmly against his throat. Completely terrified, Yoshida finally recognizes his attacker and whispers Tojo's name. Just then, the guards arrive, and the villain yells for them to get our protagonist as quickly as possible. But to escape, the young man kicks the toilet with all his force, shattering it to pieces. He then uses the broken toilet as a support and jumps over the stall wall to flee. The young man manages to jump over the stall, and the security guards are shocked by his agility. Without hesitation, he throws himself against the bathroom window and breaks it on impact to escape. Annoyed by the escape, the villain offers $2 million to whoever can capture our hero. With the money on the line, the security guards don't think twice and jump through the window after the fugitive. With the henchman on his tail, the protagonist runs desperately through the dark city streets. The brutes yell for him to stop, but the young man keeps running without looking back. After a while, the henchmen lose sight of him and wonder where he could have gone. But our hero was hiding the whole time in a pile of trash bags nearby. He thinks that was too close, but now his identity has been revealed, and he's out of time. But with the blade in hand, he believes there is still a chance to get his revenge. The scene then takes us to the front of a luxury hotel where a black car is parked. Inside, Yoshida asks his men if they are sure the attacker was really Tojo. With a furious look, the villain tells them to get him no matter what because he wants to finish him personally. Meanwhile, the scene takes us back to the well where the two prisoners are trapped. Inside, Amano and the other young man are weak and complain that they are dying of thirst. But suddenly a rope is thrown into the well, taking them both by surprise. They look up and see that it's our protagonist who has come back for them. Surprised by his return, the girl then asks if he managed to finish Yoshida. With a frustrated look, our hero just replies that he ended up messing everything up in the end. Just then, the other young man crawls on the ground and desperately begs for some water. With that, our hero throws a bag with some water bottles and food down to them in the well. The man grabs one of the bottles and desperately drinks the water to quench his thirst. Our protagonist watches them from above, but suddenly something unexpected happens. Amano's cell phone starts to ring, and to his surprise, the name Koki Yoshida appears on the screen. He then makes a shushing gesture to the two prisoners and tells them not to make a sound. On the other end of the line, the villain yells furiously, asking where the heck the girl has been. Without saying a word, our hero answers the call and waits for his enemy's reaction. Yoshida then realizes that Amano is with Tojo, and the young man confirms the suspicion without hesitation. The villain asks where they are, but the protagonist warns him that their next meeting will be his end. But Yoshida reveals that his friend Yuji is with him and invites him to come and get him. Furious, our hero yells that this is between them and tells the villain to release his friend immediately. The enemy then asks if the young man will come quietly if he decides to free his friend. Tojo makes a counteroffer and offers to trade the two prisoners for Yuji's freedom. But the villain laughs and says he doesn't care one bit about the lives of those two. Our protagonist falls silent for a moment, realizing his bargain didn't work. He then bluffs and says that a copy of the report survived and can prove the villain's guilt. But Yoshida doesn't believe him and says if that were true, he would have reported it a long time ago. Annoyed with the conversation, the villain loses his patience and asks what he really wants. The young man then shouts that he just wants to clear his name because he doesn't want to be gone yet. He thinks that he wanted to finish the enemy with his own hands, but now he has no other choice. Yoshida then proposes a deal and offers money and protection if he brings the copy of the report. Our hero listens to the whole proposal over the phone with a serious and focused expression. With a determined look, he accepts the deal and tells the villain to send the meeting location. Then the protagonist hangs up the call, ending the negotiation with his greatest enemy. The two prisoners panic and warn him that it's obviously a suicide trap. But Tojo coldly replies that he already knows that, and unfortunately, there's no other way. He then throws the cell phone on the ground and says he might not come back and that they can do whatever they want. Desperate, Amano grabs him and yells that he's going to meet his end because he doesn't even have the copy of the report. The young man says he can't drag Yuji into this anymore and that this is his last chance. Sometime later, we see our hero in a clothing store picking out a new look for the confrontation. With his new clothes, he walks down the street while a cook complains that his knife is missing. For his plan, the protagonist stops by a store and buys 2 bottles of a strong drink. The scene then takes us to an abandoned and ruined building where he makes his preparations. Inside, he lights a fire and sits on the floor with the drinks and the knives he took. With great concentration, the young man begins to wrap his hands, preparing for the final battle. He then pours the drink on the floor and uses the fire to create a circle of flames around him. With his hands wrapped, the young man slams them hard on the ground in a gesture of determination. He then bows in a deep reverence, showing all his respect for someone. On his knees, our protagonist bows towards the city as if saying goodbye. He then asks his parents for strength and promises that he will get his revenge and join them soon after. The next day, our hero watches the city from a rooftop as snow begins to fall. At Yoshida's mansion, the security guards are surprised to see that the wretch actually showed up. With firm steps, the protagonist walks towards the henchman without showing any fear. From a balcony, the villain watches the scene with a satisfied and confident smile on his face. He then gives the order to his henchman, ensuring the young man doesn't leave that place alive. One of the guards tries a surprise attack from behind, but our hero dodges with agility. With that, he is completely surrounded by the brutes while the villain just watches everything. The protagonist then yells angrily at his enemy and tells him to come down and face him once and for all. With a mocking smile, Yoshida invites him to come inside and talk since it's cold. The security guards open the huge gates of the mansion so our hero can finally enter. But he demands that they release Yuji first, or he will leave that place immediately. The villain then makes a gesture with his hand and seems to agree with our protagonist's demand. Then Yuji is thrown out and assaulted by the henchman in front of his friend. The young man supports his friend, and the villain proudly says he is a man who always keeps his promises. One of the guards questions the decision and asks if they won't lose their advantage over Tojo. But Yoshida smiles and doubts that he would run away carrying a dead weight with broken arms and legs. Yuji is shocked to see that his friend is alive, and Tojo apologizes for dragging him into this. But his friend yells at him and asks if he looks like a coward, because they are in this together. From above, the villain gets tired of the drama and yells for them to stop talking and come inside. Yuji then holds him and warns him not to go in, because the place is full of henchmen, and it will be his end. Our hero yells for Yoshida to release his friend, and promises he will enter the mansion to settle everything. But Yuji refuses to leave, and yells that he's not going anywhere because he's going to settle everything right there. Tojo then says goodbye and asks his friend to live a good life and visit his grave from time to time. With a determined look, he watches the guards take his friend away as he prepares for the fight. Alone, our hero finally enters the mansion and faces the henchmen waiting for him inside. Inside, the villain descends the stairs with an air of superiority to meet his opponent. The door is close, and the protagonist walks down a hallway filled with blades on the floor. His eyes glow with a red fury as the snow continues to fall around him outside. Two brutes armed with batons position themselves to block our hero's path. From the top of the stairs, Yoshida asks if he finally brought what they agreed on before. But the young man replies that he's not an idiot and asks if the villain thinks he would bring something so important. Angered, the enemy yells for him to stop stalling and asks if he thinks he's afraid of that. With that, the henchmen charge as a group towards the protagonist, ready for the attack. But our hero reveals 2 bottles of drink and tells them not to be tense and to have fun. The villain looks at him with disdain and asks if that is some kind of gift for him. The camera focuses on the 2 bottles of drink that the protagonist holds firmly in his hands. At that moment, a pair of elegant shoes enters the scene, drawing everyone's attention. At the mansion's door, an imposing man appears with the silhouette of other henchmen behind him. Yoshida is completely shocked and asks what his father is doing in that place. With a serious look, the man replies that he is there to clean up the mess his son caused. With that, Yoshida's father's henchmen bring in a gagged Yuji and Amano into the mansion. Our protagonist is completely surprised to see his acquaintances captured like that. The 2 hostages look defeated and hopeless as they are watched closely by the brutes. The man then says that if you're going to do something, do it right and without leaving any trace behind. The villain is shocked and asks if his father is going to eliminate everyone since Amano was on their side. But the older man calls him knave and questions if he really thinks the girl is loyal to him. He then reveals to everyone that she was the one who leaked the autopsy report to our hero's parents. Tojo is speechless at the revelation and looks at the young woman, trying to understand the whole situation. Furious with the betrayal, Yoshida slaps the girl violently across the face with all his might. He yells at her and calls her a traitor for stabbing him in the back after taking his money. But Amano confronts him and says that despite everything, her heart is not rotten like his and the others. The young woman also reveals that she couldn't stand seeing the young man's parents searching for witnesses everywhere. The villain's father gets angry and kicks her hard, promising that he will bury her along with Tojo. The man then turns to the protagonist and asks if he is the so-called Manabu Tojo they are looking for. Our hero replies indignantly that he made him go through all that without even knowing his face. With a cruel smile, the man says he doesn't need to know people who are worth less than insects. The older man then gets straight to the point and demands to know where the copy of the autopsy report is. But the young man cracks a defiant smile and firmly assures him that he will never tell him. The 2 then stare at each other in a tense silence with everyone's fate hanging in the balance. Yoshida's father then signals to his henchmen, who prepare to act at any moment. The man boasts that the forces supporting him are far beyond the young man's imagination. He also claims that it doesn't matter where the report is because when the young man is gone, everything will be over. With a cruel smile, the man says that, by the way, he has something to tell our hero. He then reveals that the men who eliminated his parents are right there in front of him now. Upon hearing this, our protagonist's face contorts into an expression of pure fury and hatred. His wrapped hand trembles with rage as he clenches his fist with all his might. With that, he screams the man's full name with an uncontrollable and overwhelming anger. The young man then yells that even an insect fights back and throws one of the bottles with all his force. The bottle shatters on the floor, spreading the flammable liquid all over the mansion's floor. One of the henchmen steps in the liquid and slips, surprised by the young man's sudden attack. With that, the brute falls hard to the ground, unable to keep his balance on the wet floor. He gets soaked with the drink and glares at the protagonist with a look of pure hatred. But our hero wastes no time and lunges at another henchman with incredible speed. Yoshida's father yells that it's a flammable liquid and calls the protagonist a coward. Without hesitation, the young man uses his knife and lands a precise blow to the neck of one of the brutes. He then finishes the henchman with another swift and brutal blow, staining everything with red liquid. Yoshida panics and yells for his men to get him all at once because he's alone. But the fight continues and several henchmen are already down on the mansion floor, completely defeated. With a focused and hate-filled look, the protagonist prepares to face the rest of the enemies. He then kicks the other bottle of drink to spread more flammable liquid around the place. With that, He slides on the wet floor and takes down another henchman with a well-aimed kick. He then puts on sunglasses and picks up the knife from the floor, getting ready for more action. Yoshida calls him a show-off and yells for his men to finish him once and for all. Two brutes run towards him, but the young man manages to dodge their attacks. He then throws some kind of powder in the enemy's eyes, leaving them completely blinded. The dust spreads through the air, and the henchmen are disoriented by the surprise attack. Taking advantage of the distraction, our hero advances with his knife and attacks them without mercy. He hits one of the brutes with a precise blow while the other tries to recover. All covered in red liquid, the protagonist turns to face the rest of the enemies. One of the henchmen tries to clean his eyes, but the powder seems to have caused serious damage. Without hesitation, our hero attacks again, hitting another one of the brutes with his knife. The henchmen are now all down and having trouble seeing through the dust. The remaining brutes stay on high alert and try to defend themselves from the protagonist's attacks. Yoshida gets desperate at the scene and runs his hand through his hair, not knowing what to do. His father then tells him to get the drink quickly to help clear the dust from their eyes. The villain explains that the drink can wash away the dust, since water doesn't work in that case. He runs to the cellar, but Amano grabs his leg, trying to stop him from helping. Furious, Yoshida yells for her to let go and calls her a wretch for still getting in the way. He then kicks her hard to get rid of her and continues on his way to the cellar. Down and injured, the girl thinks that this is the least she can do to help. The remaining brutes prepare for the next attack, armed to the teeth with their blades. The mansion floor is covered with fallen henchmen, while the dust still hangs in the air. With the drink, the guards finally manage to clear the dust from their eyes and get back to the fight. The man tells them not to panic and warns them to be careful with the liquid on the floor. Now recovered, the enemies prepare to surround the protagonist again with everything they've got. One of the henchmen then jumps over the staircase to attack our hero with a surprise blow. He manages to knock the young man to the ground and pins him with a knife right at his neck. With a victorious smile, the older man gives the signal for his men to finish the job once and for all. The other brutes advance on the protagonist, who seems to be completely trapped. But suddenly Yuji gets up and with a war cry attacks one of the henchmen from behind. Even injured, he holds the guard tightly and endures the blows to protect his best friend. The henchman then tries to hit Yuji with a knife to get out of the bear hug. But our hero manages to block the blade with his wrapped hand, just in time to save him from the blow. With a swift move, he throws the guard away with impressive and brutal force. Yoshida yells furiously and laments not having finished the young man's friend off first. The protagonist then blocks another henchman's blow, using his arm as a shield. His wrapped hand seems to have absorbed the entire impact of the attack without any major issue. He continues to fight with great ferocity, even being completely outnumbered. With a powerful elbow strike, he hits the face of another enemy who attacks him from very close. Lying on the ground, Yuji challenges Yoshida and yells that he's not afraid and will finish him first. He then throws one of the fallen henchmen at the others, creating a distraction. The remaining brutes prepare for the final attack while our hero faces them. With a confident smile, the young man lights a lighter and asks if they need a light. He then throws the lighter on the ground, igniting all the flammable liquids spread around. With that, the remaining henchmen are engulfed in flames, screaming in pain and agony. Taking advantage of the chaos, our protagonist advances and kicks Yuji in the face to push him away. He then prepares to deliver the final blow to his friend, but the villain intervenes in the attack. With a powerful kick, our hero hits Yoshida's face squarely with great force. The villain falls to the ground, shocked, and wonders how everything got to this point so quickly. Our protagonist then steps on his face with force to pin him to the ground. With a cold look, he asks if his enemy has any last words to say. But Yoshida's father takes Amano hostage and threatens to finish her if he touches his son. The man presses the knife to the girl's neck, ready to carry out his threat at any moment. Our hero dares him and try while Yoshida on the ground desperately begs for forgiveness. The villain promises to clear his name and pay whatever he wants if the protagonist spares him. The older man says to end it and warns that if he touches his son, he will show no mercy. But our hero stares at him coldly and asks if he really looks afraid of being gone. Amano and Yuji yell for him not to worry and tell him to finish them all at once. Our protagonist then demands that the villain hand over all his money to him. The enemy agrees on the spot and says he also has gold bars and will go get them for him. The villain goes up the stairs and his father thinks there's a weapon in the safe and that the young man will pay dearly. With a victorious smile, the man tells our hero to take the money and get out of there at once. But our protagonist exchanges a knowing glance with Amano, who is injured on the floor and understands the plan. Just then, the older man notices the exchange of glances and strikes the girl with great force. With a swift move, the protagonist throws one of his knives towards the main enemy. The blade flies through the air and hits the elderly man's head squarely with surgical precision. And without hesitation, he advances and finishes the man with a series of brutal and merciless blows. The guy hits the mansion floor, lights out. Amano gets up struggling, looking totally relieved that the nightmare is finally over. Our MC walks over and helps her up while the dude's body is just lying there on the floor. The girl warns him there are guns in the house and they gotta watch their backs. Suddenly, Yoshida shows up packing heat, swearing he's gonna send them all to the afterlife. He comes down the stairs with a suitcase full of cash, screaming he did his part of the deal. But when he gets to the bottom, he sees his dad flat on the floor and completely freaks out. With tears in his eyes, the villain yells at our main guy, asking where their deal went. A voice calls him from behind a folding screen, daring him to come over and settle it once and for all. Without thinking twice, the enemy unloads his clip at the screen with all his rage. But he hears the voice again and spots a cell phone playing a recording near two goons. The phone keeps playing the recording just to lure the villain's attention over there. With his guard down, our MC pops up from behind and lands a slash in his arm with the knife. The villain screams in pain and drops the gun while our main guy hits him with a powerful kick. He takes him to the ground and pins him down with all his strength to finish the job. Yoshida screams, calling him a traitor and asking why he took out his dad like that. Our hero says he promised to wipe out the whole family, and he always finishes what he starts. With one final brutal move, he ends the villain with a precise stab to the head. Amado and Yuji watch in silence as the enemy's body drops lifeless to the floor. The bloody knife hits the ground, and the MC finally gets the revenge he's been dreaming of. With tears in his eyes, our main guy shouts in relief that he finally avenged his parents. Then he turns around and looks at Yuji and Amano, who are on the floor, hurt but safe from everything. The girl struggles to help her friend up, and they lean on each other to get out of there. Our hero points to the exit and tells him to go ahead because he's still got business to attend to. Alone, he finds a safe and cracks it open, revealing stacks of cash and gold bars. But amidst all the dough, he notices a white envelope hidden in the back of the safe. Curious, the guy grabs the envelope and holds it tight in his bandaged hands. Outside, Yuji and Amano trek through the snow, moving away from the mansion with difficulty. They look back with worried faces, wondering what their friend is going to do. Just then, our MC walks out the front door carrying a big black bag. He hands over the bag and says there's 40 million in gold for them to split and disappear. Amano feels guilty and says with a shaky voice that she betrayed him in the past. But the guy says she was threatened too, and it's time to let go of all the grudges. Yuji asks with a serious face if his buddy isn't going to run away with them. With a sad and tired look, our hero replies that he can't keep running anymore. But his friend refuses to leave and grabs him, saying he's sticking with him even if it's the end. The MC shows the envelope and says he has a plan and won't drag them into it. Amado is shocked and screams desperately like she realized what he's planning to do. He asks for just one night to fix everything and promises he'll come back to them alive. Yuji holds her back tight while she screams that she can't let him carry that burden alone. Yuji holds the girl and says that's enough, and now all they can do is believe in their friend. Our MC watches them walking away from the mansion in the falling snow. The scene cuts to a man in a suit standing next to a guy lying lifeless on the ground. Far away, Yuji and Amano hide under a bridge to rest from their injuries. The guy looks at the girl and asks what the heck was inside that mysterious envelope. Amano answers it's probably docs proving all the corruption of the city's big shots. Confused, the young man asks why something that important would be in that house in the first place. She reveals the villain's dad was the deputy police chief, so it wasn't hard to get access to everything. The MC's friend stays leaning against the wall, trying to process all this new info. The girl explains that because he had the evidence, the big wigs protected him and let him do whatever he wanted. Furious, Yuji says if Tojo goes alone, he's gonna die, and decides he needs to go after his friend. But the girl holds him back and asks him to chill, believing the guy's plan has a chance of working. She explains that for the powerful people, the villain's dad was a nuisance they wanted to get rid of. And because of that, Tojo's only chance to survive is to join them to reach his goal. Then the scene shows a photo of a bald old man in bed with two women. We see it's our MC, now in a suit, tucking that photo into his jacket pocket. With his new look and the bag in hand, he walks up the stairs of a big temple at night. He keeps climbing and sees two guards standing at the door waiting for him. The security guys block him and ask who he is, but the young man just says he wants to see Mr. Goda. With a serious look, one of the goons says the boss is resting and tells him to come back tomorrow. But our MC insists and says firmly that it has to be today, no matter what. The guard cracks his knuckles and asks with a smirk if the kid is looking to check out early. Unfazed, our hero calmly starts unzipping the bag he's carrying. And from inside, he tosses the villain's dad's head on the floor, shocking everyone there. The guards are terrified by the scene and ask what he's planning to do with that. Tojo tells him to let their boss know that Yoshida Manjiro has been properly taken care of. The goon gets nervous with the message but agrees to wait and tell his boss what happened. 2 minutes later, a voice from inside the temple finally tells the guards to let him through. He enters and sees 3 more goons standing in the courtyard waiting for him with stone, cold faces. The MC walks up to a wooden door and opens it carefully to finally go inside. Inside, he finds a bald, tattooed man being served by a beautiful lady. The big boss picks up his teacup and gets ready to sip while staring at the newcomer. Analyzing him, the man asks straight up if he's the Tojo everyone is looking for. The guy is a bit surprised by the question and asks how he knows exactly who he is. Goda says Manjiro hired men to handle him and now he's here begging for his life. Annoyed, the boss slams the table and asks how he has the nerve to ask for help after everything. Our MC stays silent, surrounded by the boss's goons staring him down. Tojo dares him to end it if that's what he thinks, or else listen to his proposal till the end. Looking serious, he holds up the envelope and asks what the boss thinks of what he's got. Gota smiles, calls him interesting, but asks for a good reason to keep him alive. The woman takes the envelope from our MC's hands to hand it to her boss. She walks with the envelope toward the big boss waiting at his wooden desk. The man opens it and finds the compromising photo of the old guy with the girls. But the boss doesn't look impressed at all and asks if the kid thinks he can blackmail him with that. Tojo says it might not matter to him, but for the higher-ups it does, because he's got worse evidence. With a confident smile, he asks if the man knows how many people he's taken out just today. Then the boss gets ticked off and asks if that's a threat, because the kid isn't on his power level. Our hero says it isn't a threat since he's got absolutely nothing left to lose. He then reveals that if he doesn't report back by midnight, the rest of the evidence goes straight to the cops. The boss still doesn't care and asks what that has to do with his situation right there. The guy explains that the last place he was seen was there, so the big shots will think he's the mastermind. Hearing that, the man is completely shocked and stunned by our MC's audacity. He finally gets the plan and says the kid didn't come to beg for help, but to drag him down with him. Tojo tells him to choose to use the evidence to make more bank or hit rock bottom together. The boss laughs, saying he's a fun kid and reminds him of himself back in the day. With that, the man offers a drink to our hero as a sign of respect and to seal the deal. Without hesitating, the guy grabs the cup and downs the whole thing in one go to lock in the agreement. Then he puts the empty cup back on the tray, wrapping up the chat with the mafia boss. Gota says he'll clean up the mess, but on the condition that the kid works for him starting today. Our MC cracks a slight smile, accepting the offer and his new destiny from then on. Our hero bows and swears to dedicate his life to serving his new boss starting now. Gota orders his heavy hitter Muto to clean up the mess and contact a cop to hush up the case. The brute agrees and turns to leave to carry out his new important mission. Then the mafia boss grabs his cane, leaning against the wooden table to stand up. He tells the girl to treat the kid well and make sure he stays there for the night. But our MC reminds him again that if he doesn't return by midnight, the evidence gets sent. With a smile, the boss tells him to cut the act, because he knows exactly what his real intention is. He states with certainty that the kid never intended to do that from the very start. Our hero smiles and apologizes for getting busted while the boss walks away. Sometime later, the woman enters a room and starts getting ready for the night with the guy. She puts on her stockings carefully and sits on the edge of the bed waiting for our hero. With a seductive voice, she calls him over, saying the boss said to treat him very well tonight. The MC walks up to the lady who is sitting on the edge of the bathtub waiting for him, but suddenly he tosses a dress at her. He says he's exhausted, asks to be left alone in peace, and slams the door in her face. Looking frustrated, the girl seems annoyed by our MC's lack of interest. Meanwhile, our hero chills in a bathtub full of hot water to get some rest. In another room, the boss calmly smokes a cigar while the woman watches him closely from afar. She comments that the guy, as expected, didn't even look at her twice in the room. Gota agrees, saying he's not average since few can suppress their desires like that. The woman asks her boss if she should keep a close eye on our MC. Gota agrees and says that he won't be easy to deal with, but that over time he will discover his weakness. With a serious look, the boss wonders if he can really feel safe making him his new pawn. The lady then turns to the man with a serious expression and says she got the message loud and clear. The next day, we see our hero sleeping peacefully in a comfy bed at the Mafia temple. Some time passes. Suddenly, our MC's eyes snap open like he just had a nightmare. Startled, he sits up in bed, sweat dripping down his face and looking terrified. Just then, the woman appears sitting on the bed, wishing him a good morning while wiping the sweat off his face. Tojo thanks her for the care and says he's got to bounce, asking her to thank Gota for him. But the lady says there's no rush and shows him the TV remote so he can see something. On the TV, the news reports a fire that resulted in the passing of Yoshida and his sons. The guy is impressed by the speed but asks about the other 8 goons who were there. IM explains they were criminals and nobody gives a damn if they go out like that. She then invites him to stop worrying about everything and just enjoy the moment with her right there. With a serious look, our MC gets closer to the lady and asks for her name. She smiles and introduces herself as I am Munakata, happy he finally decided to ask. But Tojo apologizes and says he's got something to handle, moving away from her on the bed. With an annoyed look, the woman watches him as he gets up and leaves the room. The scene then takes us back to the bridge where Tojo approaches Amano and Yuji. Seeing him, the girl gets surprised and stands up to welcome him back after everything. With tears in her eyes, Amano hugs him tight and shouts in relief that he's finally safe. She then says with a smile that she knew he'd make it back alive to them in the end. Our MC then says with a serious look that starting today, they won't be hunted anymore. Hearing the news, the girl hugs him even tighter and starts crying tears of relief and happiness. Yuji gets emotional too and asks why she's crying over such good news for them. The scene then shifts to an old, worn-out building where the 3 of them are crashing, and to a table full of delicious food. Yuji then praises the girl, saying he didn't know she had that kind of talent in the kitchen. Amano brags that she's been living on her own since she was 8 and knows how to get by just fine. With that, the 3 raise their glasses and make a toast to celebrate the new life waiting for them. They then sit down to eat together and enjoy their first peaceful meal in a long time. After eating, Amano asks Tojo what he plans to do with his life from now on. The guy replies that with the cash he grabbed, he's thinking of opening a small business for them. Yuji gets hyped about the idea and asks with a smile if that means they're presidents now. The girl then tells Tojo that whatever he decides to do, she'll help him with whatever he needs. Yuji looks at the lady and asks if she isn't going to go back to working at that club after everything. She reveals her younger brother has an illness, and that's why she had to work there to help him. The two then toast again, celebrating the fresh start and the new chance life gave them. Sometime later, we see Yuji sleeping deeply on the living room sofa, completely out cold. Our MC then lies down on a mattress on the floor to get some rest. With his eyes open, he stares at the ceiling, seeming to think about everything that went down. Just then, Amano shows up wearing his shirt and asks if he'd let her stay there with them. The guy says there's only one bed and a sofa, so he'll sleep on the floor so she can take the bed. But the lady stops him and puts a hand on his shoulder to get his attention. She says his wounds haven't healed and invites him to sleep together in the same bed. The two then lie down side by side but without touching each other at any point in the night. Meanwhile, Yuji keeps sleeping soundly on the living room sofa, clueless about everything. Amano then reveals to the guy that she's been into him since their student days. But our hero seems to be asleep and doesn't show any reaction to the girl's confession. The next day, Yuji asks if the lady is going to live with them while a man watches them. The MC confirms, saying she's got nowhere else to go and they need to buy a new bed. The friend then comments that with the dough they grabbed, the three of them can live well for a while. But suddenly, a group of tattooed heavy hitters shows up in front of the two on the street. One of the bullies stares them down with a grin and asks if they're the ones they're looking for. Yuji gets tense and asks if they know them, but our MC stays super calm. Scared, the friend says not to get involved and tries to back away from the trouble fast. But the leader calls him out and mocks him, saying they went easy on him last time. Our hero then asks with a cold look if they were the ones who hurt his friend before. The guy screams he didn't do anything, begging them not to start a fight. The brute then threatens to beat him every time he sees him on the street and tells him to be ready. The trio of bullies stares at the two friends with contempt, ready to start a brawl right there. But the leader gets annoyed and lands a slap on Tojo's face, asking if he's got a problem. Wasting no time, our hero strikes back with a devastating punch right in the aggressor's face. With the force of the blow, the brute goes flying and hits the ground hard, completely stunned. He stays on the ground with his face all messed up and covered in red liquid from the punch he took. The other two goons run to help their boss and call him a bastard for fighting back. Our MC then opens his shirt and reveals his chest full of battle scars. The bullies go silent for a moment, surprised by our hero's attitude. Furious, the leader orders his goons to get the guy with everything and finish him off once and for all. With that, the two heavy hitters run toward our MC to attack him together. But the guy cracks a sinister smile and seems more than ready for the fight to come. The fight kicks off, and the two goons rush at our hero with everything they got. But he dodges with ease and lands a powerful punch right in one of the enemy's faces. With a furious look, he keeps punching the fallen brute without any mercy. He then turns to the other goon and gets ready for the next attack with a focused look. The last bully tries to land a punch, but our MC blocks the hit easily. He then grabs the enemy's arm tight and twists it to immobilize him completely. With a powerful knee strike, he finishes the brute, who spits red liquid from the impact. The group leader stays on the floor, shocked and frozen seeing his goons get taken down. Scared, the brute asks to talk, but our hero keeps getting closer. He then grabs the leader of the bullies by the collar, ready to keep the beatdown going. Without hesitating, the guy lands another powerful punch on the enemy's face who provoked him. But Yuji holds him back and asks him to stop, because their life finally stabilized. Tojo lets him go and warns him that he's letting him walk today, but next time will be different. The goon helps his boss up while our MC turns to leave. They threaten him saying they know his address, but the guy invites them to come by any time. Yuji explains their boss is Kuro-san, a dangerous guy who runs that whole area. Our hero then puts a hand on his friend's shoulder to try and calm him down a bit. With a smile, he suggests they fight this boss and take control of everything. The friend is shocked by the attitude and thinks Tojo has changed and is a different person now. He then worries and says they're definitely gonna bring a ton of goons to the fight. But Yuji remembers two guys he helped before and says he's gonna call them for backup. The scene then takes us to a more remote and slightly poorer part of the city. There we see a heavy hitter with a popsicle in hand and another guy smoking a cigarette by the fence. Tojo watches them from afar and comments that they don't look like much help in a fight. But the friend guarantees that even if they don't fight well, they are people of total trust. The guy smoking then asks Yuji who the opponent is that they're going to face. With a clenched fist, the guy replies with a serious look that the enemy is that Kuro-san guy. Hearing the name, the two new allies get completely shocked and super scared of the situation. Tojo says they were the ones who hurt his friend, and that he's going to settle the score with all of them. But the smoker laughs and says he isn't scared and that he's wanted to end that bastard for a long time. The heavy hitter agrees and says he was also waiting for those words to jump into action. Our MC gets impressed and says they have more guts than he imagined. He then says courage alone won't win the fight and that for a small group to win, they need a plan. With that, the guy points to his head and says they need to use that place to their advantage. Sometime later, a white van arrives at high speed in a more remote and dark location. From inside, several of the enemy's goons come out armed with bats, ready to brawl. Then this Kuro-san guy appears and asks his men if this is the right meeting spot. One of the goons confirms and says he watched all day, and they've been there the whole time. The big boss then asks his lackey how many enemies are waiting for them inside. The blonde bully replies there are 5 and that the guy who beat him is a crazy ex-con. But the boss laughs, says he's been to prison too, and orders his men to finish them off fast. From inside the spot, our hero watches through the window as the enemy squad rolls up for the attack. His allies are in there too, and everybody looks locked and loaded for the battle about to go down. Then one of the new allies pops up on top of a bookshelf and shoots a grin at our MC. Without warning, one of the brutes kicks the door in with full force to raid the place. The enemy gang busts in and finds Tojo's crew waiting for them right in the middle of the room. Kuro-san stares down our hero and asks if he's the one who took care of his boys earlier. With a cold and serious look, the MC replies without hesitating that, yeah, he's the one responsible. The big boss smiles confidently and screams for them to come at them with everything they've got. Furious, he gives the order for his goons to grab our MC as fast as possible. The pack of brutes charges forward armed with wooden bats, ready to attack. But one of the allies dumps a bucket of powder from the top of the shelf to blind all the enemies. The powder spreads through the air, and the goons get completely disoriented by the surprise attack. The boss screams for his men to take him down, complaining that using quicklime is a dirty trick. One of the tough guys tries to climb the shelf to get him, but the ally is ready for combat. With a powerful kick, he smashes the enemy's face and sends him flying away with huge force. Smiling, the guy grabs a metal pipe, getting ready to cause more chaos with the other goons. Then, another bucket full of water is prepped to be dumped on the enemies lying on the floor. The water reacts with the lime, causing immense pain to the goons caught in the trap. The boss gets ticked off and calls our hero's group cowards for the cheap tactic. The fight rages on, and Tojo manages to snatch a bat from one of the goons in the middle of the chaos. He twists the brute's arm with all his might, making him scream in pain from the move. The blonde bully complains, saying the group's methods are dirty and totally unfair. But our MC replies that it's just the famous eye for an eye rule. Wasting no time, he charges and drops the blonde guy with a powerful and precise kick to the chest. With that, all the goons are down on the floor, and our hero is the only one left standing. Furious, the boss yells at Tojo and swears he's going to end him with his own bare hands. But the guy rips his shirt open and dares him to bring it for the final showdown once and for all. The boss calls him brave and agrees to fight him man to settle everything. He rips his shirt open too, revealing a strong chest covered in a massive tattoo. The two stare each other down in the middle of the room, bracing for their final clash. Without wasting a second, the brute charges and lands a heavy punch on our hero's face. With the force of the blow, the MC gets thrown back and hits the floor hard. But before he falls, he manages to grab the enemy's arm and pulls him down to the ground with him. They both hit the floor and start trading blows, going at it with everything they have. Our hero ends up at a disadvantage, and the boss locks him in a tight rear naked choke. The brute squeezes with all his strength, and our MC starts losing air from the hold. Yuji yells for his friends not to interfere, because this fight belongs to our hero alone. Amano thinks that if Tojo wants to run this area, he needs to win this by himself. The boss screams that he's gonna send them all to hell and tightens the chokehold even more. Our MC grinds his teeth in pain and starts fading out from the lack of oxygen. He then remembers all his friends and how they supported him up to this moment. Yuji and Amano ask if he's sure he doesn't want to call for backup for the final battle. The brute calls him a shrimp and says he'll never beat him, not even in his dreams. But our hero manages to stand up and stumps the ground hard to break free from the choke. He breaks loose and the two separate for a second in the middle of the room again. The MC then charges and lands a combo of powerful punches right on the enemy's face. The boss is completely shocked and stunned by the power and speed of the hits. Our MC mocks him, asking if that's all the strength the boss has got. Furious at the taunt, the brute charges with a powerful punch aimed at the guy. But the MC counters and lands a solid headbutt right on his opponent's face. With a pained smile, the boss challenges him to see who breaks first in this fight. With that, they start trading brutal headbutts in the middle of the room non-stop. Our MC grabs the enemy's head and keeps attacking him with everything he's got. The exchange of blows continues, and a lot of red liquid splashes everywhere from the impact. Both of their faces are completely messed up, but neither backs down from the fight. The defeated goons wonder if the boss passed out from that combo of hits. But our hero steps back and stares him down while the boss can barely stand straight. With a victorious look, he approaches the enemy, who drops to his knees on the floor. The MC's friends are shocked by the scene, realizing just how strong he's become. Lying on the ground, the brute orders his men not to just stand there and to attack at once. But the brute stands up and says they won't get past him no matter what. Amano then shouts for them to stop, because the fight is finally over with the boss's defeat. The enemy falls to the floor exhausted, leaning against the wall so he doesn't pass out completely. With a winning look, our hero says he lost, and that now the score is settled. But he turns around and says he still hasn't paid for what they did to his best friend Yuji. Without thinking twice, he kicks the boss in the face with full force to finish the job. The brute goes lights out for good and hits the floor completely defeated. With his face all smashed up, the boss screams in pain and rage on the floor, totally beaten. The blonde goon then yells that he already called his cousin on the force and nobody's escaping. Our hero doesn't flinch and says he'll wait for the cops to arrive, no problem at all. One of the allies panics, saying they need to bail or they'll all get arrested right now. But the MC calmly picks his shirt up off the floor, getting ready for what's coming. He tells his friends to chill, because nobody is getting arrested and they're gonna wait. The smoker still doubts it, saying they might be completely screwed in this situation. But Yuji calms him down, saying it's all good and to trust his friend. Just then, footsteps are heard, and the cops finally arrive at the scene of the chaos. An officer asks what's going on there, seeing all the brutes lying on the floor. The blonde guy points at the group and accuses our hero of starting the whole brawl. The cop stares at the MC and ironically praises him for having the guts to beat up his cousin. Our hero gets the picture and realizes that's why the boss was so arrogant. The officer says it's too late now, and that he'll have forever to think about his stupidity in prison. But the guy stares at him coldly and asks if he really has all that authority. With a smirk, the cop brags that in this place, he is the law and can do whatever he wants. The blonde guy asks his cousin to let him land one punch on the kid before taking him to the cell. The officer agrees with an evil smile and orders his men to arrest everyone there. Following the order, the other cops step forward with their batons ready for action. But our hero pulls out his phone and asks if he can make a quick call first. The officer laughs at him, saying there's nobody around who can go against his authority. But our hero warns him that in 5 minutes, he'll be on his knees begging for forgiveness. The blonde guy asks if he doesn't know about the connection between the cop and Chief Tanaka. The goon brags that the cop is the chief's nephew, and that above them is the powerful Manjiro. Smiling, our MC thinks to himself that they don't know he already took out this Manjiro guy. The officer tells him to make the call so they can see who ends up on their knees in the end. Our hero dials AM to ask for help from his new boss. He gets on the phone while the cop and his cousin watch him with disdain and confidence. On the other end of the line, our MC talks to IAM and asks her to pass a message. With a serious look, he thinks this is a good chance to see if Goda is actually reliable. In his office, the woman knocks on the door to enter and talk to her boss about the issue. She walks up and informs the big boss that Manabu Tojo is asking for his help right now. Goda listens to his assistant's message very carefully, but he tells her to refuse, saying the kid hasn't been useful yet and is already making demands. The woman agrees and heads toward the boss, but she reminds him that if they hang him out to dry now, it might reflect badly on his credibility. IM says trust is a two-way street and that he still has him in the palm of his hand. The boss caves and orders Muta to handle it, but warns that Tojo is going to pay dearly for this. Back at the fight, the cop mocks him, asking what happened to all that big talk from before. Our hero stays silent, wondering if Goda has no intention of actually saving him. The cop gets tired of waiting and orders his men to take everyone to the station at once. But suddenly, one of our hero's new allies grabs one of the officer's hands tightly. The cops are surprised by the brute's attitude as he stares them down with a serious look. The officer threatens him, asking if he knows what happens to people who lay a hand on a cop. The blonde guy screams for them to give up and stop resisting, because they're finished. One of the allies looks at our hero, wondering if this really is the end for them. But suddenly, the cop's phone starts ringing with a call from his chief at the station. He screams at his subordinate, saying he really messed up this time. The officer is confused, saying he was just arresting some thugs on the street. On the other end, the chief asks if he isn't talking about Manabu Tojo by any chance. Terrified, the cop confirms the suspicion his boss, who sounds super pissed off at him. With a victorious smile, our MC thinks things are getting very interesting. The officer agrees to let him go immediately and hangs up the call with his chief. The blonde guy doesn't get it and asks what's happening and why he doesn't just arrest them. Enraged, the cop screams for his cousin to shut his mouth and calls him an idiot in front of everyone. Then he smacks the blonde guy with his baton, accusing him of touching our hero. Two officers hand a baton to the MC as a way of apologizing. The blonde guy's cousin apologizes, saying it was all a misunderstanding and the other guys are the trash. But Tojo reminds him of what he said earlier and stares at him with eyes full of hate and vengeance. With a cold look, he orders the cop to kneel and apologize for what he did. Scared, the cop kneels on the floor and starts bowing, asking for forgiveness. He begs our hero to spare his life while bowing repeatedly on the ground. His men and the other bullies watch the scene in silence, completely shocked by everything. With his face all bruised, the officer continues to desperately beg for his life. But the MC tells him to take his trash and get lost, never appear in front of him again. The cop agrees to the order and gets up with a smile of relief on his face. With that, the group of cops and bullies leaves the scene, leaving our hero in peace. One of the allies congratulates him, saying that from now on, he's their new boss. The heavy hitter agrees, saying he'll follow the new boss with loyalty from here on out. With a smile, Amato praises him, saying he was impressive in battle as always. Tojo tells them to cut the flattery and that'll be worth it if they follow him. The two new allies get hyped, shouting that with him leading, they're gonna grow big. RMC thinks for a bit and says maybe they should open a legit business. Everyone goes silent, a bit confused by the new boss's unexpected idea. He says that with Kuroki out of the picture, the whole district is free for the taking. One of the allies is shocked by the ambition and asks if he doesn't think that's a bit too much. But our hero says if they're going to do something, they go all in or don't do it at all. He turns to Amano and asks her to take the evidence to Goda and pay him a visit. The girl smiles at the order, seeming to understand her new boss's plan perfectly. Our MC turns his back and says he's going to make a deal with the city's big boss. Ayam enters the office and informs her boss that a gift from Manabu Tojo has arrived. Amano enters the room accompanied by the other woman to deliver the package to Goda. She hands the envelope to the boss, saying it was a request from Tojo for him. The man opens the envelope and finds what looks like a receipt for a bribe inside. Amano reveals the recipient is a major figure in the city and this gives him leverage. The mafia boss analyzes the document very carefully. The girl stands in front of the man, waiting for his next order or reaction. Goda smiles, looking very satisfied with the gift he received from his new subordinate. Amano says she actually has another favor to ask on behalf of our MC. The boss tells her to speak straight, and she reveals the next step of their plan. With a serious look, she says their next target is the dangerous Shuhei Yoshimura. But the boss says he isn't worth his time, and he won't get involved with that guy. The girl asks him to just cut his ties with the police, and they'll handle the rest. Goda agrees but asks what's in it for him, running his hand up the girl's leg. She says as soon as they're done, he'll have a proper reward for all his help. In a flashback, one of the allies explains that the target runs the district and owns 10 establishments. He also reveals that Kuroki is just one of his lackeys, and that he pays the police chief for protection. Our hero concludes that to get the target, they need to silence the police chief first. One of the allies nods, agreeing with the logic of our hero's plan. With a dark look, he thinks that if his money is at risk, not even Goda will shut him up. The group walks toward a huge mansion that looks like the target's house. One of the allies gets worried, saying a frontal attack is risky since he'll have a lot of guards. But our MC calms him down, saying they're there to talk, not to fight. With a smile, the ally says he gets the plan and is with the boss till the end. With that, our hero's group invades the property, hopping the front gate with agility. But as they enter, they're greeted by 2 guard dogs barking at them. The Dobermans charge at the group, ready to attack anyone who gets close. With an intimidating look, our MC tells them not to be scared because they're just puppies. The dogs get spooked by the guy's aura and stop advancing, afraid of his presence. The dogs see him as a true apex predator. The 2 dogs calm down and back away, terrified of their powerful new opponent. A man appears and yells for the dogs to come back to him immediately. Then Yoshimura shows up with his goons and asks if he is Manabu Tojo. Our MC nods, getting ready for whatever happens next. The man accuses him of hurting Kuroki and coming to start more trouble on his turf. But the guy says Kuroki was personal and today is strictly business between them. The boss laughs with disdain and tells him to leave because he has no business with him. With that, 2 of his goons approach the MC to kick him out violently. But one of the allies grabs him in a strong rear naked choke to protect his new boss. The other ally jumps in the fight too, grabbing the other goon by the collar tightly. The allies shout that they won't hold back and go after the other goons with everything. One of the guards takes a devastating punch right to the face with huge force and violence. The other goon gets caught off guard and grabbed by the neck with no chance to react. Tojo smashes the man's head into the ground hard, and red liquid splashes sideways. With the 2 guards down, our MC stands victorious over his defeated enemies. One of the remaining heavy hitters gets enraged by the scene and screams that they asked for this. The boss gets annoyed and threatens him, saying with one call, they're all going to prison. But the guy dares him to make the call and says calmly that they'll wait, no problem. The brute is shocked by the audacity and can't believe what he just heard from the kid. He grabs his phone and calls the police chief, asking him to send someone over. On the other end, the officer asks if it's about a guy named Manabu Tojo, and he confirms. The police chief apologizes, saying he can't touch the guy because his hands are tied. Furious, the man screams, asking why he's abandoning him after all the money he paid. But the officer simply hangs up on him, leaving him completely without support. The boss stands in silence, unable to believe he was abandoned that easily. With a victorious smile, our hero asks if they can finally go inside to talk now. Defeated, the man says he has no choice and tells them to come in, saying he'll hear what they have to say. Inside the mansion, the big boss awaits our hero and his group with a serious look on his face. With that, the protagonist and his allies face the man, who calmly begins to serve tea. The big guy then takes a sip of the drink and asks directly what they want to talk about. With a confident smile, Tojo says he heard that Kuroki was put in charge of some arcades. Hearing this, the boss gets furious and questions if he took down one of his underlings on purpose. Our hero explains that he had issues with Kuroki, but as an apology, he'll take over the arcades. One of the henchmen gets angry at the proposal and yells that the guy is being way too arrogant. The guard then pulls out a blade and asks if the young man is looking for some serious trouble. But the boss raises his hand and signals for his henchmen to calm down and stop the commotion. The man then says he's never heard of him and questions if he really has the skills for the job. Our protagonist then reminds him that on the phone, Boss Tanaka refused his request upon hearing his name. The big guy is shocked, realizing the young man has someone powerful backing him up. He then laments that if Manjiro were alive, he would never be humiliated like this by a kid. Hearing the name, Tojo asks if by any chance he's talking about Manjiro Yoshida. The man is completely shocked by the question and asks if the young man happens to know him. Our hero then reveals that he set him up once, but that he's no longer in this world. The boss then realizes the story about the fire was a lie and that Tojo was the one truly responsible. He stares at the protagonist in fear and wonders who this guy is to have done all that. Defeated, the man agrees to the deal but proposes a 70-30 split in his favor. But our protagonist touches his ear and asks if that isn't backward, wanting the larger share. With a smile, he says he'll take 70% and the big guy gets 30. The henchman gets angry at the audacity and yells at the young man not to be so cocky. But our hero gives him a cold stare and tells the bodyguard to stay out of it. With that, the protagonist's allies stand up, ready for the fight to come. However, the big boss tells his henchmen to be quiet and says they'll accept the offer. Then our hero changes his mind and says he'll now take 80, and the boss only gets 20. The big guy and his henchmen are completely shocked by the guy's new proposal. Without much choice, the man says that's fine by him and that the deal is sealed. Our protagonist is happy they resolved it quickly and says he looks forward to working with him. Then the young man extends his hand to seal the deal with a formal handshake. With that, the two finally shake hands and make their new business partnership official. The scene then takes us outside the mansion, showing a bit of the surrounding environment. Back at the base, one of the allies brags about how they easily took down the henchman. Yuji then comments with a smile that it seems they now have a steady source of income. But the protagonist says it might not be that easy because the boss's reaction was strange. With that, he lights a cigarette and warns everyone that they can't let their guard down now. Meanwhile, at the mansion, the henchman complains that he can't stand Tojo's arrogance anymore. But the big guy yells at his subordinate and says he's not the one who makes the decisions around there. The bodyguard then quickly apologizes to his boss for getting worked up. The boss warns him that Tojo has dangerous support, and if they cross him, they'll disappear. The henchman yells that he's not afraid and that, at worst, he'll take the protagonist down with him. But the boss says that won't be necessary and asks if he knows why he handed over the arcades. The subordinate is then confused and asks his boss what he means by that. With an evil smile, the man says there are ways to get rid of people without getting your hands dirty. Meanwhile, at the team's base, one of the allies analyzes a large map of the city. He points to the map, explaining that the two arcades are in the busiest part of town. With that, he concludes that Yoshimura is trying to set a trap for all of them. Our protagonist questions the reason, because if the district is busy, sales should be good. The ally then remembers that the plaza used to be the territory of a guy named Cobra. Not understanding, our hero asks with a serious expression who this Cobra guy is. Amino explains that he's famous around there and that he used to live off the snake trade. We see an image of the man in the past, completely surrounded by several dangerous snakes. The young woman continues, saying he got 8 years for almost taking someone out in a fight. The ally then warns that the guy is crazy and will definitely come back to reclaim his territory. Our protagonist says he knew about the trap but doesn't care if it's Cobra or someone else. With a determined look, he warns that anyone who gets in his way will be crushed. With that said, the young man slams his hand on the map, showing all his determination. Yuji then supports him and says they've been together since they were kids and he'll stick by his side. The other allies also get hyped up and shout that nothing ventured, nothing gained, and they're in. Amano just watches the scene in silence, seeming thoughtful about the whole situation. With a smile, our hero tells Amano that everything will be alright and not to worry. Then Yuji proposes they celebrate conquering the two arcades with lots of drinks and meat. With that, the scene takes us to the front of a Chinese restaurant where the group is going to celebrate. Already inside the place, everyone toasts excitedly and shouts that they'll drink until they drop tonight. During dinner, one of the allies notices Tojo is gone and asks where he went. Yuji then explains that his friend is a lightweight and probably went to the restroom. At that moment, a large black bag is mysteriously placed on top of the table. It was our protagonist who came back, leaving his friends confused by the bag there. He then opens the bag and pulls out several brand new cell phones for them. One of the allies gets excited by the scene and asks if those phones are for the group. The young man then hands out the devices and says there's one for each of his companions. The ally gets thrilled and shouts that it's the latest model and that the new boss is very generous. Another companion is already testing his and comments that games run smoothly on the new device. Amano notices that hers is a different color and comments that he chose a special one for her. Yuji, however, says it was too expensive and that he can't accept the gift. But our hero says they risked their lives together and that the phones will build more trust. With that, they all look at each other, seeming to understand their new leader's intention with that gesture. The protagonist then proposes a toast and promises that everyone will get their share of the profits. Then everyone raises their glasses and toast together, celebrating the team's new unity. The scene then takes us to an empty restroom, showing the sinks in the mirror. One of Tojo's allies walks down a hallway when a person in a hood appears in front of him. At that, the hooded man purposely bumps into our hero's companion's shoulder. The guy gets irritated and yells at the stranger to watch where he's going before continuing on his way. Back at the table, Tojo seems to be installing something on his teammate's new cell phone. Next, Amano answers her new phone and asks who's on the other end of the line. With a smile on his face, Yuji answers the girl's call in a very playful way. The young woman then gives him a confused look and asks why he's calling when he's right in front of her. He explains that he just wanted to test the new device, and with that, the whole group starts laughing. Suddenly, the ally realizes his new cell phone is gone and stands up from the table in a panic. Furious, he yells that the guy who bumped into him in the restroom must have taken his phone. The young man then turns around and runs off to try and find the thief and get his phone back. Seeing this, our hero stands up and tells the others to keep drinking. He'll go after him. With that, the two run through the dark city streets, chasing the mysterious thief. During the chase, Tojo's ally ends up tripping on something in the dark path. He then falls hard on the ground and can't get up because of the nasty fall he took. Our protagonist helps him, and his friend tells him to go after the thief quickly now. Tojo then tells his friend to head back first and says he'll handle the situation alone. With that, the young man takes off at high speed to catch the thief, who is already far away. Back at the restaurant, the pink cell phone that seems to be Amano's is on the table. The young woman then gets annoyed with one of the allies and yells for him to stop it immediately. Yuji defends himself, saying it wasn't him, while Amano glares at him angrily at the dinner table. The girl then picks up the phone and sees that there's actually a missed call from a strange number. With a serious expression, she decides to call back and asks who's on the other side. A voice threatens her, saying that if she doesn't go to the usual place, something bad will happen. The young woman is completely frightened by the threat and hangs up the call in silence. The scene then changes, taking us to the dark city streets at night. Meanwhile, our hero continues to chase the hooded thief down a dark alley. The chase extends through the narrow alleys with both of them running at high speed. The crook ends up running into a dead end and is completely cornered there. He turns to face the protagonist, realizing he has nowhere left to run. Desperate, the man runs up the wall, showing surprising agility to escape. With a big leap, he tries to jump over the high wall to finally get away. But our protagonist is even faster and jumps right after him to catch him. In the air, the young man manages to grab the thief's leg, stopping his escape at the last second. With that, he pulls him down hard, making the man fall flat on the alley floor. Tojo then pins him down and says with a victorious look that he finally got him. The hooded man panics and swears it was all just a big misunderstanding. Our hero just gives him a cold, intimidating look, not believing his words. The thief pulls off his hood and upon recognizing him, calls the protagonist by the name Manabu. He reveals they were in the same prison and questions what the young man is doing there. The man on the ground shouts in relief that Manabu is alive and thanks the heavens for it. The scene then takes us to a night view of the city with its illuminated buildings. In the alley, the two sit down and the former prison mate begins to tell his story. He says that the prison became peaceful after Tojo left and Yumi was moved to another cell. But he warns that Yumi swore to crush the protagonist if he ever found him alive out there. With a smile, Tojo says he can come and that he'd actually like to thank him. The man then gets confused and asks why everyone says the young man passed on. Our hero says he doesn't want to talk about the past, but that he's alive and plans to grow. The ex-inmate says he got out a month ago but couldn't find a job and stole out of desperation. Crying, he calls himself pathetic and begs not to go back to prison because he's hungry. Seeing his desperation, our protagonist seems to console him with a gesture of understanding. Then the young man puts out his cigarette with his shoe, making a decision about what to do. He then surprises the man and invites him to join his crew and work with him. With tears of joy, the man says he'll do anything if he's accepted into the group. Our hero then tests him and asks if he would do it even if he were asked to leave this world. The former cellmate explains that he can't even survive a single day alone without help. With determination, he swears the protagonist is all he has and that he would do it gladly. With a smile, Tojo says he was just kidding and helps him up so they can leave. With that, the two return to the restaurant, leaving everyone else surprised by the scene. The ally who was robbed clenches his fist tightly on the table, still angry about the situation. Furious, the ally yells at the thief and swears he's going to mess him up for taking his phone. But Tojo steps in and asks his friend to wait a moment before doing anything. He explains it was a misunderstanding and introduces Furuoi as a new member of the group. The new member then returns the phone and apologizes, saying he didn't know whose it was. The guy accepts the apology and says that since he's Manabu's friend, he's welcome there too. Our hero then promises that he'll never let him go hungry again and that he will protect him. With that, the new member gets emotional and swears he will follow his new boss for life. With the situation resolved, Tojo notices Amano is gone and asks the others where she is. Yuji answers without much concern, saying she might have gone to the restroom. But another ally says she got a call and left looking pale and in a hurry. At that moment, our protagonist's cell phone starts to ring with a mysterious call. With a serious expression, he answers the call, seeming to hear something whirring on the other end. The young man then says he has a bad feeling and tells everyone they need to go. The others stand up, worried, and wonder if someone is messing with the girl. The scene then takes us to a night view of the city with its illuminated buildings. Next, we see a dark alley with a fire escape, creating a tense atmosphere. Alone, Amano walks down the dark alley, seeming to be heading to some kind of meeting. She then comes face to face with three men who are waiting for her, and one of them insults her for showing up. The three figures step out of the darkness, revealing a man in a pink suit and two henchmen. The man in pink then yells furiously and asks where she's been hiding for the past few days. Amano stares at the man in the pink suit, seeming to recognize him from somewhere in her past. Furious, he confronts her and yells that she still hasn't paid her debt and was trying to run away. With her hand on her face, the young woman says she brought the money to finally settle everything with him. She then hands over several wads of cash and says that after this, she doesn't want to see him again. But the man complains about the amount and asks where she got all that money. The girl explains that she only borrowed $160,000 and has already paid back $400,000, and it still wasn't enough. With that, the man grabs her by the hair forcefully, showing all his aggression. He says that without his money, her brother would have been gone, and that his life isn't worth that much. The young woman then glares at him with hatred and asks how much more he wants to finally leave her alone. With a wicked smile, he says she now owes $2 million for betraying him. The man then spits on the ground in contempt, showing he's not going to make it easy for the girl. Amado yells that he's just a client and asks who he thinks he is to act like that. Injured, the man strikes her hard and calls her a tool for making money. With the blow, she falls to the ground in a lot of pain and glares at him with hatred in her eyes. The attacker then lifts her up by the face and looks at her with contempt for what she said. He says he doesn't care how she gets the money, but she can't forget the debt. But as he's about to strike her again, a strong hand grabs his wrist, stopping the blow. The man is completely shocked and surprised to see that someone has intervened in the fight. It was our hero who, with an intimidating look, tells the attacker to stop right now. Enraged by the interruption, the aggressor demands to know who on earth our hero is. But Tojo gives him an icy stare, questioning why he would lay a hand on the girl. The man in the pink suit screams that what he does with his woman is none of his concern. Hearing this, Amano looks at her savior, stunned by his sudden appearance. The young woman then shouts that the guy isn't her boyfriend and means absolutely nothing to her. Her attacker gives a sly grin, asking if they're her clients and even offering a discount. Without hesitating, the protagonist drives a powerful fist straight into the man's face. From the blow, the guy staggers backward, clutching his face in intense pain. Our hero then declares with a cold look that he'll ensure he never speaks that way again. The man in pink holds his bleeding mouth, still in disbelief about what just happened. Just then, his henchmen arrive, shouting that Tojo dared to put a hand on their boss. However, right behind them, our protagonist allies appear, providing some serious backup. With both crews assembled, a brawl breaks out as the young man's friends charge into the fight. The enemy gang leader wipes his nose, remarking that he's seen the hero's face somewhere before. Our protagonist induces himself as Gaku Tojo, reminding him of a $6 million debt he once collected. The man angrily confirms that the girl does in fact have a large outstanding debt with him. Tojo then turns to Amano, who explains the guy is just trash that used her in the past. With a chilling smile, the young man says that means he doesn't have to hold back on taking him down. The aggressor is frozen with fear as our hero cracks his knuckles, preparing for battle. And with that, the protagonist ends their talk with a devastating kick to the man in pink. Seeing their boss get hit, one of the goons yells his name and rushes in to help. But Tojo's ally is quicker, landing a direct punch that hits the enemy's nose hard. With the man on the ground, he warns him to stay down if he doesn't want to get hurt any worse. Meanwhile, Haruto gets to his feet, questioning if Tojo will really fight for a woman like Amano. Sensing he's outmatched, the man in the pink suit resorts to dirty tricks, pulling a sharp blade from his pocket. Gripping the knife, he lunges forward with a furious gaze, telling the protagonist to prepare himself. Our hero steps in front of his friends, calling his opponent a coward for using a weapon. The enemy lets out a laugh, mockingly asking if the young man is scared of his little blade. Unimpressed, Tojo simply opens his shirt, revealing a muscular and heavily scared physique. He stands his ground with a dark expression, showing he's not the least bit intimidated. His attacker is utterly terrified by the sight, screaming for the young man not to come any closer. Consumed by desperation, the man in pink charges with the blade, yelling for him to be gone. Our hero just watches him with a cold, calculating gaze, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. In a swift motion, he dodges the lunge and seizes the aggressor's wrist in a tight grip. The protagonist then twists his enemy's arm, forcing him to drop the knife to the ground. Immediately after, he lands a precise kick to the guy's knee, throwing him completely off balance. Taking advantage, the young man grabs his foe and forcefully brings his head toward the ground. The man in the pink suit is knocked out cold from the heavy impact, ending the fight instantly. But our hero isn't finished, relentlessly striking the downed man's face without a hint of mercy. Watching the scene, Amano becomes frightened and begs Tojo to stop, not wanting him to dirty his hands for her. Face down, the aggressor pleads for his life, admitting that everything was his fault. But Tojo grabs him, demanding he pay Amano $6 million as compensation within 1 month. Terrified, the man frantically yells that he'll pay, promising he will fulfill the agreement. Furthermore, our hero orders him to gather his goons to kneel down and apologize. The gang leader is stunned by the new command, looking like he can't believe what he's hearing. Losing patience, the protagonist lands another powerful punch right on the fallen man's face. That does it. The guy immediately gives in, shouting that he'll apologize and do exactly as he's told. So, the boss and his henchmen get on their knees and apologize, also vowing to pay the debt. Amano then finds her voice, screaming for them to disappear and never show their faces to her again. The three men stay kneeling on the floor, staring at the couple in complete fear of the situation. Our hero reinforces her command, yelling at them to get lost and asking if they didn't hear the lady. The henchmen help their boss to his feet and flee, as Tojo calls them worthless scum. Overcome with emotion, the young woman throws her arms around her savior, thanking him for coming for her. He holds her close, assuring her that everything is fine now and promising no one will harm her again. One of his allies then jokes around, asking for a hug too since they all came to help out. But another companion tells him off, saying to let them have their moment and that they should go on ahead. In tears, the girl asks why he went through all that for someone like her, feeling so unworthy. He replies gently that it's because they are friends and her troubles are his troubles too. The young man tells her to forget her past, because starting today, a brand new life is waiting for her. With a smile, he tells her to cut the nonsense and get ready for the arcade delivery tomorrow. With the conflict resolved, the protagonist says it's time for them to leave and prepare for the next day. Amano looks up at him, her eyes filled with emotion and a soft smile, looking full of new hope.